views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, it's the Bronx Buzz. We come to you live from the BronxNet East studios at the Hutch Metro Center. And the idea every week is we put together reporters. We do a reporter roundtable to talk about Bronx issues, and they are people who write about Bronx and city issues. And tonight's Bronx roundtable is going to extend to a very large roundtable because the table is going to extend all the way into Albany, New York, where we will be joined by David King, who writes for the Gotham Gazette, and he will be coming to us via Skype from Albany, New York. Also, in the studio here, we will have Jeff Mays from DNA Info, who is the City Hall reporter for DNA Info. And as you might expect, traffic is a mess coming out of the city all the way up here to the Hutch Metro Center, so he's actually not here yet. So we're going to begin the program with my good buddy David King, who is with the Gotham Gazette over there in Albany, New York. And as I said earlier, he comes to us via Skype. David, nice to have you with us on the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great, it's great to have you. Let's just do a little background since this is Gotham Gazette's first appearance on the Bronx Buzz. Let's just talk in general about the Gotham Gazette. What is it? And you know, why is it so important? Frankly, I think it is real important. Why is it so important for Bronx people to know about it?
Well, we're an independent publication that's published by a good government group called Citizens Union. But we cover policy issues that are important to city residents, things that include ethics, integrity, education,
government, politics.
Really,
I mean, you're being very modest there. Sure.
Politics.
All of the above. You know, what is interesting to me in terms of the development of media and the development of journalism, when blogs came out and we started with things like that, I think people had this idea that a blog, especially kind of the way the name sounds, is going to be kind of an unimportant thing, just kind of a throwaway thing. But the way media has gone, the way newspapers, certainly for us in the Bronx, have cut back on Bronx media, on local coverage, you got to go to these blogs and read them, because some of them, like yours, Gotham Gazette, are very, very good. And frankly, for me, that's where I get the inside news that we used to get in newspapers, and now we don't get that anymore.
Yeah, we actually have been around for more than 10 years, and we used to do a lot of aggregation, sharing stories that we thought were important to New Yorkers. And over time, there were less stories to share, and we're doing more of our own work.
Do you now? You specifically do the Albany legislative beat, the government beat, right?
Yes,
the
sir.
State government. Do you do a story every day, or do they require a certain number of stories? I mean, how does kind of your week of work look?
Well, session, it really depends on what's going on in Albany. Generally, have about stories a week.
How many was that? Say that again.
We generally have about 3 stories a week.
Uh-huh.
And it really depends on how much in-depth work you're doing.
We were talking before the show via Skype about what I think is some very good in-depth reporting that you do in Albany. Is it difficult in this day and age, and I certainly find it, that elected officials back off, they're not as forthcoming? Is it difficult in this day and age to do the kind of investigative work, to do the kind of real hard journalism that you guys do? Or do you find that, elected officials and others are really forthcoming with, what's going on?
Well, as you see, the city and the state, the governor and the mayor facing federal investigations. And they're pretty tight-lipped with information.
So they are. So David's really got to do his work to put out a lot. And I complimented you off the air, and I'll compliment you on the air, because I find a lot of information about what's going on in Albany. So I certainly recommend the Gotham Gazette. Let's talk about a couple of things that you've written about. Most recently, and maybe most importantly, the session that is on a slight hiatus, but I guess they're going back now for 9 more days in Albany. Tell me about what's gone on and what do the people in the Bronx need to know about what has happened and what has not happened.
Well, they came back to session yesterday. They're leaving town now. And basically, they've skipped over any major ethics legislation that we expected due to the indictments of both legislative leaders last year. Both have been convicted on multiple corruption counts. And yet, there seems to be no real will to pass any ethics reforms at this time. Their major focus at this point seems to be passing bills having to do with expanding access to alcohol, fighting the heroin epidemic, and ride sharing. They're also focusing on fantasy sports.
You could certainly sense from the tone in your article that you were like, well, the big thing is really ethics reform, and well, they're doing that other stuff, but that's not really, the meat and potatoes really of what you certainly talk about in the article that a lot of people wanted, because they really did want to see ethics reform. Why do you think we're not getting it? Is it because legislators are being protective of potentially themselves, or do you think it's that they just can't get together, certainly between the Assembly and the Senate, on a package that everybody will support?
Well, this year, one of the major things is that there's an election coming up, and both of those conferences are happening to each other heading into the election. However, this is something we've seen play out year after year, where one side says the other is stopping any progress from happening. And it really takes something major to get them on the same page. I think a lot of people thought there'd be nothing bigger than the indictment of the 2 legislative leaders, but that doesn't seem to have gotten them on the same page.
Do you think that the governor's, backing off, we know he backed off that commission a little while ago, that the governor is part of the problem here, is that frankly, even though he may stand up and say that he wants to see ethics reform, but when it comes down to it, you know what? He's not the biggest advocate either in this case.
Well, yeah, a lot of reformers say if he really wanted to get things done, he would be doing a barnstorm, push across the state, like he did with wage increase and family leave. Instead, he brings up bills he wants to pass with 9 days left in session, and there isn't much time to debate or sort things out.
The other thing, or another, I shouldn't say the other, because you really do so much. Another thing that you wrote about is this whole idea of investigators. And, again, going back to the ethics question, you would think that if somebody is interested in really reforming Albany and given especially what we've had with, Skelos and Silver going down in really the ugliest fashion, that there would be immense transparency. But talk a little bit about this article that you wrote about investigators around Governor Cuomo.
Well, so the governor is facing a federal investigation into his economic development program called the Buffalo Billion. A lot of people are interested because a lot of these contracts were awarded to companies that gave major donations to the governor, and their contracts were written in such a way, or the requests for proposals were written in such a way that it really narrowed down who could apply to these specific Cuomo donors. They said things like they had to have existed for 50 years if they wanted to apply to build a building, or they had to be 10 feet away from a certain building. Now, the Cuomo administration and people have said these were typos, but obviously it's piqued the interest of the federal investigators. Now, the governor couldn't avoid the bad press from having his close aides indicted. But what he did was say he's going to have this independent investigator come in named Bart Schwartz, who used to be a federal prosecutor, and said he was going to take a look into all these programs, review them, and see what he could find, and then recommend changes. What's odd about this is that there are a number of investigative watchdog agencies that could have handled this, from the AG to the comptroller, the inspector general, the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, But instead, Cuomo has hired a personal investigator, and we've yet to see his contract. We don't know how much he's being paid, and we don't know exactly what he's tasked with investigating. The governor puts the investigation in the terms of there are a couple bad seeds who happen to be his advisors who need to be looked into and are really the crux of any investigation. However, a lot of reporting lately has shown that these issues go straight back to the governor's office, that some of these folks had dealings directly with, the governor's office, despite the governor sort of pushing them away from them and sort of throwing them under the bus, if you will. So a month since this was announced, the hiring of Bart Schwartz, he still doesn't have a contract. Meanwhile, we've seen a host of subpoenas handed out, businesses, aides to Cuomo, and a number of lobbying firms. So it's just getting bigger.
It feels like the more we feel like, well, okay, so we've gone through this with incredibly, two Senate leaders have gone down, and certainly any number of lower officials have gone down, and the very powerful Speaker of the Assembly, when I say gone down, they literally have gone to jail. They've all gone down, and you would think that there would be immense transparency in Albany now and say, you know what, we would like to put it all behind us, but it somehow never seems to end, does it? I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And there was this story that you didn't write, but it was in the Daily News relating to a potential investigation of Bronx Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie and the Bronx Democratic County Committee. I don't know, do you have anything to add to the story that was in the Daily News today that said that Michael Benedetto claimed to have been interviewed by the federal prosecutor, or is it really one of these that we'll just have to wait and see what happens?
I mean, we will have to wait and see. However, we knew from the time that Hastie was put forward as a candidate for Speaker that there were concerns about his spending and his relationship to the Bronx County Committee. He also is one of the top recipients of per diems, which are reimbursements that he gets from traveling to Albany. So there have been questions about the way he takes money and his relationship with the Bronx County Dems. So it's not exactly surprising to see investigators are poking around here.
Right, although, and again, neither you nor I certainly have an inkling as to what's out there. All right, David, we have not seen hide nor hair of Jeff Mays. I'm sure he's got the white knuckles around the steering wheel as he's trying to get here from Manhattan. So we're going to take a short break and we'll do our Buzz of the Week. And since you're with us, we're going to talk about the relationship between the governor and the mayor and what the implications are of that relationship here in the Bronx, the city, and even the state of New York. So you hang on there, David. We thank you for being with us. We're sorry Jeff Mays hasn't made it yet, and we'll be right back with more on the Bronx Buzz.
You think getting dumped by text is harsh? Try getting dumped by a tennis ball. My ex-owner drove me out to the woods, yelled fetch, and by the time I brought the ball back, he was gone. Yeah, I was pissed. But the folks at the shelter helped me let go of my anger. I learned coping skills, like taking it to the hole. Boom! Now I'm ready to fetch again. But how about I throw and you run and get it?
If you want to stay in the know about the latest happenings in Español, check out Diálogo Abierto, BronxNet's own Spanish show, Wednesdays, 6:30 p.m. on Channel 67. The latest in news, arts, culture, politics, and what's going on in your neighborhood. Diálogo Abierto, the best way to stay connected in Spanish. See you there. Te esperamos.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, did you know 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Let's go to theshelterpetproject.org and meet if you are in a shelter near you. Harlow, oh, she's one great listener who loves to hear all your stories. My kind of cat. Cerulo is a sweet, goofy boy who's eager to please. Sounds just like another dog I know. So go to theshelterpetproject.org, search your local shelters and rescues, and go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Thanks for coming in for the interview.
Oh, yeah, of course.
All right, we got your personal references, your resume, high school diploma or equivalent.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Yes, it's right there.
Great.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. And our guest today is David King from Gotham Gazette. We were to have Jeff Mays from DNA Info. Stuck in traffic, isn't that the way? Dave, we're thrilled, of course, that you're with us. We were talking, or said we were going to talk about Bill de Blasio. What do you make of this, for want of a better term, war, really, between the governor and the mayor? Is it a personal thing, or do you think there are larger agendas, going to happen as a result of it? Or is it really they just simply two guys who don't get along?
Well, I think the crux of this has been that the governor is always competitive with other Democrats. He's known to want to be the top dog in the state. And when Bill de Blasio first rose to power, he was sort of the preeminent progressive in the country. He really framed himself as this new progressive. Now, obviously, his stock is no longer that high. At the time, the governor clearly wasn't comfortable playing second fiddle, and he made moves to put himself in more control and take over a lot of the mayor's agenda, including minimum wage increase, paid family leave, pre-K, issues like that. Now, since then, it's gotten a lot more dicey, depending on which you want to talk about. They've battled about just about everything, from housing to you name it.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the most recent thing we're dealing with is this investigation into de Blasio's fundraising, and the State Board of Elections. She's a separate independent technically investigator who, by Governor Cuomo, came up with this report. Says a lot of what we know federal investigators are looking into, and referred to the Manhattan DA. But Glenn Blaine of the Daily News also happened to get a copy of it. The mayor's office blamed the governor for leaking it, and they're trying to say that it's this big political hit. The truth, of course, is that these investigations remain, regardless of whether this report was leaked or not. The findings of the investigation said that a Republican spokesman for the board leaked the memo and also sent it to Senate Republicans. However, we know that Blaine was tipped to this story before he was actually given the memo. So who actually tipped him to the existence of this investigation is still a mystery, despite the state investigation.
I have to, as an aside, based on what you had said earlier about, the governor and, the investigators and, that's all a bit of a cloud. The mayor has got a very similar situation with these special agents. It's like literally the same kind of thing. He's appointed these special agents. It seems obvious and clear to me the only reason he's done that is because he's made them special so that they can't be investigated for conflict of interest. I mean, it just seems so obvious, and it's really the same thing that the governor's doing.
Yeah, I think the governor has done a lot better job take command of the situation. The mayor has made a series of drafts and strategic positions on this that just boggle the mind, from agents of the city to saying that he's going to get a list of donors who didn't deliver wish lists. It puts him in a terrible position and shows that he's not being the transparent person he promised to be, and who he pushed other people when he was coming.
It's interesting that you. It's interesting that you say that he hasn't done a good job of it. In a way, it's almost sophomoric. I hate to put it this way because it's like we're dealing at the lowest end of the barrel. At least when the governor does it, it doesn't look as bad as it does when the mayor does it. How is the mayor received in Albany in general? Aside from Governor Cuomo, he came up there and he lobbied, of course, for mayoral control, which apparently I've heard a lot of kickback that it hasn't gone that well. In general, is he received well, or is kind of what the governor is putting out kind of filtering into the rest of the legislature?
The Senate Republicans despise him, and he is their boogeyman for the reelection. Every race is going to mention the fact that de Blasio is back, Democrats has, and that there was corruption perhaps involved in the 2014 efforts to take the Senate for Democrats. I wouldn't be surprised to see a number of television spots with de Blasio's face on them this summer or this fall.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you this because you're up in Albany, and I know what I thought when I saw it, and this is going back a couple of months. When the governor put out his budget and talked about cutting CUNY, it was something like $500 million. And I mean this in very direct terms. Did he really think that this was going to fly? And what was there is no way that could possibly stand. It would have debilitated the City University of New York, one of the pride and joys of the city and one of the most important institutions, frankly, in the state. Was he real serious about putting it out? Of course, he ultimately backed off and saying, oh, yeah, my budget now says that CUNY is going to get cut $500 million.
It's hard to say how serious they were. However, they were very committed in the beginning until they finally got it a lot of pushback from electeds and press. The way they handled it afterwards was really just to argue semantics and really be evasive until finally it looked like Heastie won sort of the battle. But they left it there until it really was the last minute. So even no matter what they said about it, it seemed Assembly Speaker Heastie had to fight tooth and nail to get it out of the budget. And it put him at a disadvantage, which helped Cuomo.
Again, you hit it right on the head, but for me, that was among many head scratchers that have come out of Albany over the past 12 months. The other thing that I did want to mention in regards to de Blasio, the whole push for mayoral control, it's a much larger issue than who is the mayor right now. The question, and de Blasio is not going to be the mayor forever, he might get reelected, but it is striking to me that the dialogue that's coming from Albany about whether or not there should be mayoral control of schools is not that is this the best system, but is Mayor de Blasio fit to handle mayoral control? In other words, the philosophical idea of whether or not mayoral control of schools is a good thing, it never seems to come up.
It's very striking. No one here is really pretending they're not playing politics. And if you look at the speaker, he was the sponsor of the biggest anti-mayoral control in 2009 during the fight under Bloomberg. And now we have the Senate Republicans who are backing Bloomberg, attacking the idea of mayoral control. No one's hiding the fact that this is extremely political.
Right. Dave, Jeff Mays is here. I'm not sure. Do we have enough time to get him on? How much time is left, folks? Just let me know how much time is left. Yeah, I have a feeling we're not going to be able to, because by the time we take a break and put him on the set, we're not going to really have time. So I do apologize to Jeff, and we'll have him on another time. Dave, just to wrap it up, what, if anything, do you think will come out of the coming session in Albany, and then whatever is left over will be looked at for next year? And I guess the follow-up question would have to be, do you think the Senate balance will be upset in the coming election. So the first thing, anything coming up now through the rest of this session, do you think?
I think the best thing Mayor de Blasio can hope for at this point is a one-year extension of mayoral control.
Really, as opposed to, how could they, I'm sorry to interject, how could they possibly blow it out? Because they're going to need how do you put a system in place like that? That's not going to happen. So
Yeah, they're doing everything they can to stick it to Mayor. The Senate Republicans make no bones about it. I'd also expect action on heroin and opioids, maybe some ride sharing, and they're going to legalize fantasy sports.
Right, I saw that. And I wonder how that will shake to the Attorney General. He can't possibly be thrilled with that. Then the last question then for you, Dave, is, we're just asking you to do some election forecasting. Do you believe that the Senate Republican majority is in doubt for the coming election, or is it really a wait and see like the rest of us are going to wait and see?
Yeah, it's wait and see. We need to see what kind of candidates the side's going to recruit. Democrats have had trouble getting some people in key races. Republicans have lost some of their veteran members and haven't attracted particularly new, fresh faces. I think the most telling race, we saw Kaminsky versus McGrath in the election place Dean Skelos, and Kaminsky won by a hair. But this was a race where the incumbent Republican had been indicted on multiple federal charges,
right,
won by a hair.
Well, but that's going to come up again in September, I assume, right?
Yes.
Or in November, right? So we'll see how that goes. Dave, we're out of time. You've been a great guest as always, and next time you're in New York, we'd love to have you in the studio. Again, apologies to Jeff Mays. It just wasn't enough time to get him on. We will certainly have him back, and David Howard King from the Gotham Gazette. We will have you back. Thank you for the great work that you do, and I recommend highly that all the people in the Bronx check out Gotham Gazette. What is it? It's GothamGazette.com, right? That's what it is. All right. Thanks to David King. Thanks to you. This Monday night we'll be talking UPK on Bronx Talk, and make a note on the 17th, a special Friday edition of Bronx Talk. We'll be doing the debate for the Congress seat in the 13th Congressional District, which includes part of the Bronx. Lots to do. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Hey, I'm Darren Jaime. I'm the host of Wednesdays Open right here on BronxNet Television, Channel 67, and also on Verizon Files, Channel 33. Want to invite you every Wednesday. You get an opportunity to see what's going on in the world of news, current events, debates, public information. That's what happens here on Open every Wednesday. So we invite you to join us right here on BronxNet Television.